Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more rifle testing, and today we've got a rifle that we haven't seen in a good long while on the channel with some new ammunition that I picked up the other day. So I'm definitely curious to see what this combination can actually do, because if it performs well, it could be a really handy little deer rifle. But for the setup I brought out here today, I got out this guy, which is a Winchester Model 70 short action carbine. It has a 20-inch barrel on it and it's chambered in 243. Up on top here is a Vortex Diamondback 4-12 by 40. So definitely a very nice little handy deer rifle, that's for sure. And it has always been a pretty accurate little shooting rifle too. So I'm definitely excited to see what it can do with today's ammunition. So for the ammo I brought out here today, I got some of these. Some of the good old Remington Core-Lokt 243 rounds. These ones are 100 grain, soft point, just your typical Core-Lokt rounds. And on the back here, the box does claim 2,960 feet per second. Now I can tell you right now, we are not going to see 2,960 out of a 20-inch barrel in a 243. More than likely, it'll probably be about 2,700. But we'll see how close we can actually get to that box number. So definitely a pretty classic little combination here. Some Remington Core-Lokts in a Model 70, but what can they actually do as for performance? So for today's test, we're going to run it the same as I typically do these rifle tests. We're going to shoot 3 groups, 3 shots each at 100 yards, all of which will be through the chronograph. It might not be a perfect scientific test, but it will at least tell us if this combination is actually a good performer or not. So enough talking, let's get you guys set up with a view of everything, and we'll take our 3-shot groups, and I will give the rifle a few minutes between the groups as well to cool the barrel off and stuff. So heat shouldn't be a factor here today, especially since it's about 40 degrees. But let's get you guys a view of this target and take these shots and see just what this Model 70 can do with the 100 grain Core-Lokts. Alright, so let's take a peek at our chronograph numbers here real quick before we look at our target. The boss claim was 2,960. However, just like I figured, we have a 20-inch barrel and we were not going to see 2,960. And it pretty much nailed my guess right on, pretty much right at the 2,700 feet per second mark. But let's go through and see what it actually did give us. So for a high, we had 2,741. For a low, we had 2,661. That gave us an average right at 2,695 feet per second. And of course, here's all your energy numbers and stuff for 100 grain 243 at that velocity, so you guys can see what kind of energy numbers we're actually pushing downrange. So just shy of 2,700 average is pretty much right where I figured it would be. But we had an extreme spread of 80 and a standard deviation of 24. So ultimately, not necessarily the most perfect or consistent rounds as far as velocity goes, but not too terrible considering it's a 100 grain projectile out of a 20-inch barrel. Right at 2,700 is exactly where I figured we would be. But let's go look at our target and see how these actually performed as far as accuracy goes. Alright, so let's take a look here and see what we were actually able to get for 100-yard groups. And I gotta say, it's not anything great, that's for sure. Now, for a reference, we did not start with a clean bore. It probably had about 20 or so shots through it previously, but it was a cold bore, and it sat out in the truck in about 40 to 45 degree temperatures for a couple of hours now. So our first group up in the top left is pretty terrible to say the least. But let's measure it and see where we started with at least. So that first group was right at 2.27 inches. Definitely not great, that's for sure. So let's move over to our second group, which was the top right. I don't think it's very much better, but we'll measure it and see. And yep, it's 3.29 inches, so actually a touch worse. So definitely not off to a great start. But let's move down to that center group down at the bottom there. And although I felt perfect about all of my trigger squeezes today, and I'm very confident in that rifle, I've shot it a bunch for a number of years. I know what it's capable of, and I'm very confident in my ability to shoot it. That last 3-shot group was probably the best shooting that I can physically do myself. And I did just want to jump in here in editing and say that I I always try my best on all the groups there, and I did feel very confident in all of those, but that last group was essentially my Olympic tryout capability, if you will. I put everything I could just to get that last group, and it is still nothing great, that's for sure. And it's much better than the previous 3 groups, but definitely not nearly as good as what I've seen previously out of this rifle. I can tell you that right now. It's definitely capable of much better, but let's measure that last group and see what it gave us. And that last group gave us 1.62 inches. So definitely, I can tell you from experience, this combination is good enough to technically take on a 100-yard deer hunt, but it's nowhere even close to what I've seen out of a number of other rounds through it that I've previously tested, both on and off this channel. This rifle is easily a 3/4 MOA gun at 100 yards, and that is most definitely not what we saw here today. So I'm a little bit disappointed in Remington on this one. Now, of course, your mileage may vary. Your rifle may very much like these. Mine definitely is not a big fan of them. And that could just be because they are a 100 grain projectile in a 20-inch barrel with what I believe is a 1 in 10 twist. So we're probably kind of starting to tote the line there for a 243. And to be fair, some Sierra 90 grain bullets are just pretty much touching at 100 yards all day long. So I think my particular rifle might just prefer a little bit lighter than a 100 grain projectile. But for today, through my combination, definitely quite a bit of a letdown for these Core-Lokts. Good enough to get a deer with them, but not my ideal hunting load for a 243, that's for sure. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about those results right there? Definitely a little bit of a letdown. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I did let the rifle cool down for about 5 minutes in between each one of those groups, and the barrel never got more than very slightly, the slightest little bit warm to the touch. So heat was definitely not a problem. We didn't start with a bare clean bore. We did have a very slight headwind today, but nothing that should have absolutely ruined the groups like that. So it's definitely a little bit of a letdown, but that is through my combination, which is a carbine length barrel, so they may very well prefer a little bit longer of a barrel. Now, is it still good enough to take a deer with them at 100 yards, being a 2-inch or so group? Sure, it would work, but it's definitely not exactly what I'm looking for, and definitely not what I know that rifle's capable of with other rounds. So I guess leave your thoughts in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of the 100 grain 243 Core-Lokts? And if so, what kind of results have you seen out of them? And is that good enough for you to take out on a deer hunt, or would you want to see it a little better than that? Like I said earlier, I'm very confident in my abilities with that rifle, and I know what it's capable of, and I can tell you from experience, this combination just doesn't really meet the mark that I know it's capable of. So definitely a little bit of a disappointment for today overall, but that's why you test things, because you don't know what your setup's capable of until you try it. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.